Today, we're diving into one of the most epic intellectual showdowns in modern history. We're talking about the journey from the towering figure of George Wilhelm Friedrich Hegel to his most famous and, frankly, most revolutionary critic, Karl Marx. This is a story about how one brilliant mind tried to make sense of the world and another decided that wasn't enough. He wanted to change it.
And that really brings us to the core question, the one that frames this entire conflict. What's the point of philosophy anyway? Is it to comprehend the world as it is, to find the hidden reason in all the chaos? Or is its job to be a weapon, a tool for transformation, something to arm us in the fight to build a whole new world? To get to the bottom of that, we have to start with the man whose ideas were the talk of the town.
So to really get this dialectical turn, we first need to get a handle on the philosophical system that absolutely dominated German thought back in the early 19th century. And yep, that means we're starting with Hegel.
Look, Hegel's whole massive project can pretty much be boiled down to one key idea: reconciliation. He genuinely believed that the world as he saw it, its governments, its churches, its institutions, wasn't just some random mess. No, he saw it as the slow, logical unfolding of a rational principle he called the spirit. So for him, the philosopher's job wasn't to tear everything down. It was to understand the deep, profound reason that was already there.
This quote just nails it, doesn't it? For Hegel, history wasn't one random thing after another. It was the spirit becoming real, realizing itself. The world around you, the laws, the art, the buildings, none of it was an accident. He saw it as reason made physical. The job of philosophy, then, is basically to trace the blueprints and show how it all makes sense.
And this wasn't just some abstract head-in-the-clouds idea. Oh no, it had very real-world political implications. For Hegel, the Prussian state of his day, with its king and its complex bureaucracy, was basically the peak of human history so far. It was, in his mind, the most rational and free society that had ever existed. So his philosophy, you see, ended up being a pretty powerful argument for keeping things just the way they were.
But you can probably guess, this whole idea of just accepting and understanding reality didn't go over so well with a younger, more radical crowd. They looked around and saw a world full of injustice, and they were not interested in justifying it. This set the stage for a huge, monumental break. Yeah, for a young Karl Marx, seeing all the poverty and exploitation around him, Hegel's philosophy just felt, well, totally useless. I mean, what good is a philosophy that tells you how rational a world filled with irrational suffering is? It was clear a new approach was needed.
And this right here, this quote, this defines the new mission. For Marx and his fellow thinkers, philosophy couldn't just stay cooped up in books and lecture halls. It had to become a material force in the world. Its ideas had to be put to the test, put into action, and used to actively change history. The whole point wasn't just to think about the world, it was for those thoughts to become real.
So you end up with this incredible opposition. Hegel's philosophy is always looking backward, trying to make sense of what's already happened. But Marx's philosophy, it's looking forward, trying to help create something that doesn't exist yet. One philosophy ends in a kind of peaceful acceptance, the other kicks off a revolution.
Now, this break wasn't just about what philosophy should do, it was about what reality is even made of. Marx famously said he found Hegel's philosophy standing on its head and he turned it right side up. So let's take a look at what that actually means.
So for Hegel, the idealist, history is all about ideas. It's driven by this spirit, this abstract concept of reason. The physical, material world is just a shadow of that higher reality. While Marx comes along and completely flips that script. For him, a materialist, the real engine of history is how we humans produce the stuff we need to live, our food, our homes, our clothes. That economic foundation, he argued, is what determines everything else, our social structures, our politics, and even our big ideas about the world.
So, out goes the grand, abstract spirit. For Marx, history is a series of very real, very concrete struggles between different social classes over material stuff. It's not about an idea realizing itself. It's about the very real, and often very brutal, process of people just trying to produce what they need to survive.
Okay, so if Marx wanted to analyze this material world, where did he start? To critique the whole system of capitalism, he first had to break it down to its most fundamental building block. And that little building block is the commodity. I mean, just think about it. Almost everything around you right now, it wasn't made by the person who produced it for their own use. It was made to be sold. This simple, obvious fact, according to Marx, is the absolute starting point for understanding our entire economic system.
Now here's where it gets interesting. Every single commodity has this kind of split personality. On the one hand, it has a use value. A coat keeps you warm, right? A hammer pounds nails. It's useful. But in a market, it also has an exchange value, what it's worth compared to everything else. And that's the magic trick that allows us to treat totally different things, like a coat and a bolt of linen, as if they're equal.
And this unfolds with a certain logic. First, Marx argues that a thing's value ultimately comes from the human labor that went into making it. So when we exchange goods, what we're really doing is exchanging amounts of labor time. But that gets complicated, so eventually society comes up with a universal stand-in to represent all that value. And that's money. Money becomes the universal mirror that reflects the labor value of every other commodity.
So, we've gone from philosophy all the way down to economics. But for Marx, the journey doesn't stop in the library or the factory. The final, crucial step is to take all this critical understanding and turn it into political action.
This right here is the critical link. Marx's deep dive into capital wasn't meant to be some dusty academic paper. It was designed to become the consciousness of the working class, the proletariat. It was a theory built to explain their own exploitation to them, and more importantly, to guide them in their struggle to overcome it. And boy, did these ideas have a real-world impact. I mean, a massive impact. From the famous rallying cry of the Communist Manifesto to actual organizations like the First International that brought workers together across borders. The theory started to take root. And it all culminated in world-shaking events like the 1917 Russian Revolution, which Lenin and others saw as the first spark of a global workers' uprising, a direct attempt to put these very theories into practice.
But the story doesn't just end there. In 1917, the great wheel of history, the dialectic, it keeps on turning. And just like Marx critiqued Hegel, it wasn't long before later thinkers started to critique Marx.
By the time you get to the late 20th century, you have thinkers like Jacques Camus, who are arguing that the world has fundamentally changed again. Capital had become so global, so all-encompassing, that the traditional working class, the proletariat, was no longer the key revolutionary force that Marx had identified. The game had changed, and a new analysis was needed for a new reality.
And that kind of leaves us here, doesn't it? The incredible intellectual journey from Hegel to Marx completely reshaped the 20th century. But as we stand here facing the massive challenges of our own time, that fundamental question is still hanging in the air. What new ideas will become the brain for the struggles of today? And what new dialectical turns are waiting for us just around the corner?